Hi everyone, Carrie Jansen here. Stereochemistry is currently on hiatus while we develop our first ever season of new episodes. And as promised, we've lined up some great chemistry content for you to enjoy while we're off working on those new stories. This month, we're excited to share an episode of one of our favorite shows in the chemistry podcasting world, My Fave Queer Chemist. To help me introduce the episode, I'd like to bring in my colleague, Katie Borzak. Katie is a senior correspondent at C&EN.
Hi there.
So Katie, what can we expect to hear in this episode?
Well, as you might guess from the show's name, in My Fave Queer Chemist, the hosts, Beck and Geraldo, interview LGBTQ plus chemists on their research interests and experiences with identity, challenges, and achievements in the chemistry field. The episode we're about to hear features inorganic photochemist and activist Irving Reddig. Irving discusses his background in art conservation, his experiences finding support and community in grad school, and his work promoting trans-inclusive name change policies within academic publishing.
Be sure to visit the My Fave Queer Chemist feed for even more amazing stories. We'll include a link in this episode's show notes.
And for stories about our fave historic queer chemists, check out C&EN's recent article, LGBTQ plus chemists you should know about. That piece features the contributions of innovative queer scientists, many of whom you won't find in textbooks. These trailblazers influenced inorganic chemistry, agriculture, and more. They helped reframe how the public saw AIDS and mentored queer students. We'd love for you to read it.
We'll link that article in the show notes too. And now, without further ado, My Fave Queer Chemist.
This episode is brought to you by the vaccine. Y'all better be getting those shots.
Welcome back, everybody, to My Fave Queer Chemist. I'm your host, Beck.
And I'm Geraldo, and we're really excited for today's episode. We interview an amazing chemist and activist, and we can wait for y'all to listen to it. So with that, here's our show. Today, we are really excited to introduce to y'all to an incredible scientist and activist. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Irving Reddig. My pronouns are he and they. I am a fifth-year PhD candidate at Portland State University, and I got my undergrad at Pitzer College in Claremont, California. And right now, I am researching sort of main group photochemistry and catalysis under the direction of Dr. Teresa McCormick at Portland State University.
Nice. So exciting.
Yeah.
So let's just start from the beginning, I guess. Can you tell us about your experience as an undergrad at Pitzer and then how you developed your interest in chemistry? And right before we started recording, you were telling that the chemistry people were a very small group. So how was that part of your experience too?
Yeah, my undergrad experience was really phenomenal. So Pitzer College is a PUI, and that meant, was just really a lot of emphasis on undergraduate research, undergraduate involvement in sort of a lot of different levels of the institution itself, academic and extracurricular, I guess. And so, it was there that I sort of really got to explore doing chemistry research, and then also leading backpacking trips with other grads. And so it was just like a really awesome opportunity to kind of see, I don't necessarily have to be isolated to doing one thing 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I really loved it. Pitzer is the sort of internal joke of Pitzer College is that it's Camp Pitzer. It's just like a very fun, awesome, very, wooey educational environment. A lot of, sort of like create your own major, liberal arts types.
Mm-hmm.
So that school in particular didn't draw a ton of STEM people, at least when I was there. And so the STEM sort of camaraderie that I found at Pitzer was this perfect mashup of these like really funny, funky, hippy dippy people that were also really, really rigorously involved in research. So I loved that so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so cool that you can like they don't force you to do only research, which like other schools like, or not force you, but like it's expected that's the only thing that you would do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's nice to do other things too.
Yeah, it sounds like a very unique undergrad experience. Even like Sounds very, so like I come from a liberal arts school also. I went to a PUI for undergrad, and that even sounds like so different than like probably the normal like liberal arts experience too. Like what you're saying about how it's like way more like social sciences oriented and way less STEM involvement. But yeah, I imagine that you must have gotten a lot of like hands-on mentoring and support too. So
yeah, it was cool because I think each of the schools is really oriented towards a different subject. And so it really, the sort of underlying vibe of the school comes through with every student, even if they're studying something different. And so I actually ended up barely taking any classes at Pitzer because I was a STEM major and they didn't offer many STEM courses, but we had a joint science department with two of the colleges. And then I also actually took a lot of courses at Harvey Mudd, which is sort of a, like computer science engineering oriented school. And, you know, so I got the best of both worlds. I got to, you know, like it wasn't required to wear shoes on my campus. And then also, and then also,
that's so funny.
Yeah. And then also I got to like, you know, take these really incredible, very difficult chemistry courses at Harvey Mudd. So it was a really cool experience.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's cool.
So before starting graduate school, you worked as a research assistant at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. That sounds like such a non-traditional job. Can you tell us about how you ended up working there and what your research composed of while you were there?
Yeah. So when I was in undergrad, I actually was an intern at a pharmaceutical company in a process organic chemistry lab. And I liked components of that, and then also didn't like other components of that. And, you know, as I guess it was after I graduated, I had spent probably about 2 years in total working as a independent contractor for this research group. And it was, you know, it was cool, but it was, you know, inside of a cement box, in a basement. And I knew that at the time that I wanted a bit more sort of community in my lab setting. And I actually come from an artist family. My mom is a glass artist. And it was sort of just by happenstance that I discovered conservation science. There was a program with Scripps College, which is one of the Claremont consortiums, where you could double major in art conservation and chemistry. And my organic lab partner, she was in that program, and I thought it was really interesting. And I was like, you know, wow, that just sounds like a really hard field to get into. And I, you know, as I was finishing up with this pharmaceutical company, I had done a lot of research about sort of conservation positions. I had applied to a lot of different lab settings, but they were really looking for people who had a conservation background. And I'm like a little bit old school in that I actually like talking on the phone if it's expected. If you call me out of nowhere. But you know, like to order a pizza, like the fastest way is to call them. And so I was like, well, the fastest way.
I could never
either.
Yeah. And so I called the conservation lab and I explained that, you know, I had a chemistry background. I had experience with this instrumentation, and I was really interested in, you know, interning at a museum, and that this museum, LACMA, was one of very small number of museums in the United States that has a full conservation science program. And my boss, who at the time was a 75-year-old German polymer chemist, said, you know, like, oh, great, we need more of you. You know, can you interview like next week?
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I went down there. We like really hit it off. The lab there was really awesome. It was actually, aside from the boss, the lab was all cis women. And that was the first time I'd ever, I mean, going from being at a pharmaceutical company where, you know, my boss had Latinx heritage, but then the 30 other PhD chemists on my team were all cis heterosexual white men. Who just railed on all PhD programs as completely useless. it was really awesome to suddenly be in the setting of women who were all really passionate about getting me excited for grad school, even though that wasn't really necessarily something that I had seen as a trajectory for me, because surprise, I have terrible imposter syndrome and was convinced that I was not smart enough to go to grad school. Yeah,
that's such an interesting, like I don't think I've ever met anybody, like any chemist who's ever even dabbled in like art conservation. Like that's such a cool, I don't know, experience. I'm sure it was so much fun.
But you think about it and it makes sense. But
yeah.
And I really liked a lot of components of it and then really disliked other components of it. And now I'm in inorganic photochemistry. I think from that, I really enjoyed it. We have this very cool research project that my focus was studying degradation of resins and varnishes. And I learned this really interesting thing, which was that, that LED, it was the first time that I started actually working with photochemistry. But it was actually in the context of trying to show that certain types of LEDs actually degrade varnishes and resins because of the blue fluorophores that they put in them to make them look more white adjacent. And it turns out that it just like destroys paintings and destroys varnishes. And so that was kind of the first.
So interesting.
It is very interesting.
It was the first like, very organic, radical degradation of these, tree resins was the first kind of foray into photochemistry that I had.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And so going along with that, you then moved to Portland State for your grad studies. How has been your experience as an LGBTQ plus grad student there so far?
Yeah, it's it's been really interesting. I think that, I actually applied to Portland State as on the direction of those women at LACMA. There was actually a professor here who did museum chemistry research, and then it turned out that the project that I was interested in working on fell through, and I ended up working for the right PI, the PI that is, has been advocating for the LGBTQ community as a cis heterosexual woman since her undergrad, and that I think that the Portland State Chemistry Department has grown a lot because of my presence.
We love to see it.
Yeah, we love to see it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think they hadn't, at least what I've been told is that they have never had an out trans graduate student before. And so, they were really willing to listen to the feedback that I had. At least the people who were willing to listen to the feedback I had sort of tried their best to figure out how they could support me. And there was a bit of fumbling, but I think that, I luckily at Portland State, really the professors are well-intentioned. And that well-intention has brought them to where they're at today, which is implementing really, really awesome, sort of trainings, anti-racism training, LGBTQ training, that professors at Portland State now are not professors at Portland State, professors in the Portland State Chemistry Department of all places are getting. And I think that they sort of were in the state of a lot of departments in which it's just, they were just sort of waiting for somebody of a marginalized identity to tell them what to do. In and of itself. But
But it's very important that they actually listen, because like some departments think that just by having, for example, trans students is enough, but you actually have to like ask them and listen, what is that, we need or they need, or so it's good that they're willing to listen and actually do something about it.
Well, it took a little bit of time to like train them how to listen properly, but then when it was good.
I think it's incredible just like thinking about like all of the queer and trans chemists who have like joined that department like since you started, like you're ending your PhD, which we'll talk a little bit about, but like how far your department has come, I'm sure, in the last like 5 years or so, and like how you've done a lot of like the laying of the groundwork for like future queer and trans people who end up joining the department, which was really awesome.
That's beautiful.
And I really think that they're prepared because Portland is such a safe place for trans people. There's so much access to healthcare. There's so much access to, like having a trans, from having a trans therapist to having a trans barista. There's trans people everywhere. And I think that, one of the really amazing things that came out of those, sort of discussions that my PI and I had with, with department members is that, they were saying that when they were selecting graduate students this year, typically they try not to choose folks who are local because, they encourage that so that they leave Portland and they do other things. But then the narrative that Portland is actually one of the safest cities for a trans academic got in there, and they took that off of the sort of docket list that they would usually, you kind of stamp down certain applications and not. So I mean, it's tangible and that's exciting.
Yeah, that is so
that's
exciting.
Great. So you recently submitted your dissertation, which is very, very exciting. What's next for you?
Thanks. I'll be postdocing with Dr. Miriam Bowering at Reed starting this summer. So
nice.
Ooh.
So you'll be staying in Portland, right? Reed's in Portland.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to one, working with them, and two, getting to stay in the city a little bit longer.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So you are, by all accounts, a very well-established trans activist in the STEM field. Can you tell us about how you got started with this activism work, and has your own, you've talked a little bit about this, but has your own PI lab and department been supportive of your work through all of this?
Yeah. So I think really where I first got started, was just joining my PI's lab. She actually started the Women in STEM group at Portland State University. Sort of as a need to commiserate with the two other female faculty members and other female graduate students. Yeah. And the graduate student who is the cis woman in my lab, she was just a power femme, she wore heels in the lab. It was just, it was amazing. I really looked up to her a lot, and I really looked up to the other power femmes that were in the department. And I think that, it was there that we sort of learned to advocate for each other. At the time, I was sort of navigating the world as a closeted trans person who thought they were a butch lesbian. And, and then with these very heterosexual, very feminine women, and sort of figuring out how we could advocate for each other's needs within Women in STEM. And I think really living in Portland is what allowed me to, recognize my own identity. And when I then came out as trans, I said to my advisor, I really don't want to lose women's spaces, because I really have gained a way of advocating for myself from these spaces. And I knew how a lot of women's spaces treated trans people. And I think it was from that initially that I really saw the sort of importance for advocating for trans people initially, just in women's spaces in chemistry specifically. So I worked with some of the first stuff that I did was I worked with the Women Chemists Committee to sort of update their language around applications and awards, explicitly say that, when they're talking about these communities, they're talking about non-binary folks, trans femmes and trans women. And I think it was from, really from there that I got into sort of the more general trans activism in STEM.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I can relate a little bit to, I think recently last year or so, I've been mainly because I think I've just got a little bit more recognition from being in the podcast, doing the podcast. But I remember the Women in Organic, Empowering Women in Organic Chemistry conference, which happens every year and has been happening for the past few years. I remember there was this whole thing last summer where I got invited. Where I got invited to speak at this LGBTQ thing in like at the conference, and I was like, well, I'm not a woman. And so if you like actually want to be inclusive of non-binary and trans people, then like you have to make that explicit. Otherwise, like, how are we supposed to know that? And like, yeah, I worked a lot with like the some of the organizers of that to kind of shape some of the language going forward. And still not perfect, but yeah, it's just like we don't, as like LGBTQ people, we don't have a lot of our own spaces in chemistry. And so like you were saying, sometimes you have to fit into existing spaces, which a lot of times is like cis women led initiatives. So that's been an interesting like learning curve for me and for, I'm sure, a lot of cis women in organic chemistry and chemistry in general.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, you know, because like ultimately, yeah, it's really important that cis women get behind trans inclusive feminism, i.e. regular feminism. because like, you know, there's you know, this sort of like assumption of like, oh, well, you know, trans women don't belong here, they're trans, and then they get, you know, pushed out to some other, they get pushed out with the expectation that there's a net waiting for them somewhere, and it turns out that they're so it's, but I mean, it's good, it's tough to you know, like have to reiterate and have to have those conversations, but I mean, it pays off.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thanks for doing that.
Yeah. Of course.
So you're part of a group of transgender scientists who have been pushing for a more trans-inclusive name change policies in big journals. Can you tell us about how this work got started, and then how has it been? And is it like a tedious process to get your name change on already published papers?
Yeah, so I sort of first got started with this, I think it's 2021, probably like 2 years ago now. Wow. When I think that when I was first sort of figuring out how to talk to like the Women Chemist Committee within ACS, I started just writing down things that I saw within ACS, not just publishing, but sort of all over ACS, that were hurdles for me. And so, you know, things like, you know, there was, I think at the time, was in 2019 or maybe it was 2018 when Allison Campbell was president of ACS, and she, you know, wrote a series of letters to different states that were hosting ACS meetings and specifically advocated for the relabeling of bathrooms to be genderless. And it was sort of, that was sort of the first large ACS initiative I had ever seen that was just outside of the, you know, professional division, like small single room conference spaces. And, you know, I was like, okay, well, that seems to be something that is being handled. Like, well, what about a bunch of other stuff? And one of the things that I had noticed was that I was just having a really hard time getting my name changed, like within membership even. You know, and so there's anything I just like it that things felt weird. I wrote it down. And then I was at a Noggle Step conference, and there was this queer person who does media justice, and they gave a presentation on was the gender biases that exist in technology and where those surface, you know, and in that very, you know, short 30-minute talk that this person gave, I realized like, oh, this is a software problem. This is a where the root of these systems problem. It isn't, you know, just like ACS accidentally fumbling with membership. And I sort of had this like very, you know, tunnel vision moment of like, oh, this is so much larger of a problem than I thought. And then it was sort of after that I started making my own presentations that were ACS specific. This person was in sort of the like queer artificial intelligence community. So I sort of took everything that I had written down and made them into this sort of demands list. And then anybody who was, you know, interested in saying they wanted to like support queer chemists or trans chemists, I just would email them this like really aggressive list. And And then I would, we had regional conferences, and I like signed up to host different events so that I could just be given a mic, and then no one would get to tell me what to say, and I could just say the thing that I wanted to say. And it turned out I'd had enough notoriety in these women's spaces that I started taking up the platform at these women chemist events to start advocating for trans people at ACS. And when I got linked up with, I guess some folks who were like, that name change thing on papers, that's something that seems easy enough. Like, why doesn't that already exist? And, fast forward a year of me sort of just like shooting into the dark in lots of different directions. It was actually a Twitter post that got me in contact with Jess Rucker, who's the director of global operations at ACS. And from there, it's been really fast, fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're interviewing a good time, because I actually just I meet monthly with the Committee on Publication Ethics, which is the sort of large overarching organization that dictates ethics in publishing across every academic field. And we're getting ready to sort of finalize these guidelines on establishing name change policies, which will allow journals that don't have their own policies to essentially shape their own or default to these ones that were built by the authorship. So that's been really incredible. And it was actually through, surprisingly, I mean, maybe not surprisingly, but ACS Publications has been like the international leader in name change policy on publications, also in trans inclusive customer service around name change policies. Like, they are the ones setting the standard, and they're the ones who are pushing the most for these like major publishing reforms. And I'm just super proud of the people that I work with, because they just have done a really good job listening to the trans community and just turning it around and making stuff happen.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's so
and
cool.
Yeah, I mean, I can at least just kind of give my own anecdotal story, which I know you already know, or because I told you this, but I mean, I don't know how hard it was before to change your name. Must have been really hard for this to even be an issue. And so maybe you have like a little bit of an idea of how it was like before all of these policies, but I remember just like hearing about all of this, like all of the work that you've done. We've heard you talk a few times now about this. And so I was like, you know what, I want to just do it and change my name on my first publication, which is a first author publication for my undergrad in, I think, a bioorg and medicinal chemistry letters. And it's like it's a journal under Elsevier, however you pronounce that. Yeah. And so I did some looking like a few weeks ago, and I found out that literally like the week before they had changed their name change policy.
Wow.
And it was just like a page on their website that was like, we now have this like trans inclusive name change policy. All you have to do is email this email and we'll get it processed in 10 days or whatever. You don't have to provide any like explanation, any whatever. You just have to email this like one email address and you're set to go. So I just emailed them and I was like, hi, this is the citation for my paper. Can I change my name from this to this? And they emailed me like right back and they were like, yep, it'll take 10 days to process it and then it'll be changed. And I was like, it was that easy? But literally like the week before they had like changed it. And so, I mean, I guess it's not like fully, it's like those policies haven't fully gone through for like all journals, but I guess like a lot of the main ones, I guess, for chemistry now have updated policies. And now it really is just as easy as saying, hey, change this to this. And that's that.
That's great.
I'm so happy that it really well for you.
Yeah.
What policies really looked like before, you could change your name on a past publication, but the assumption that they made was that the only reason that somebody would change their name other than marriage was was potentially fraudulent. And so the way that they shaped their policies was like very extensive proof of identification. Also, you had to be completely transparent with the name change. And so what they would do is they would print a correction notice on the HTML at the very top of the article that said, this author like John Smith changed their name to Joe Smith. And so, which is fine for, John Smith changing his name to Joe Smith, like presumably, but if it's somebody who is transgender, they're like, no, I don't include a tagline at the top of the research article that I wrote that outs me as trans.
And that like says your dead name also, like
it also says your dead name, which is just not. And so that's like, if they would even allow you to do it in the first place, because oftentimes it would be like that it was up to the publisher whether or not they felt that the change merited, like that the reason merited the change. So they actually had 100% control. You had to give them reasoning, and then there was no way out of the correction notice. That was an absolute no. It had to be on there. And so the way
weird.
Really messed up. It was made without
thinking about
at all. Trans and non-binary people, or anybody who changes their name for any reason other than marriage. And so when we were sort of shaping new policies, it was very much like, okay, get rid of these things. And figuring out, like essentially, what is the way of doing this completely anonymously, so there is no like public notice. And then, also like you don't, explaining to publishers, like you don't have a right to like this person's reasoning or their at all. Like you can maybe ask for their pronouns if that's pertinent to the publication itself. You can, honestly, what you should do is like help them be able to update their name and other user profiles if that's your goal. But yeah, it sucked before, and now it's much better.
So just to be clear, it's not like they don't submit a correction like you would do for a paper. It's just you just upload a new document with the correct name.
Exactly. If you
still
so essentially what they did is that a lot of journals, they just added an additional policy. And so if you want to use the old way, you totally can. But that now, instead of automatically publishing a correction notice, that the author, it requires the express and validated permission of the author to do a notice, but that's not the default anymore.
That's great.
That's amazing. So do you have any advice for graduate students who want to make their advocacy work in whatever advocacy work they do essential pillar of their time in graduate school? I know, it's a hard balance to find. I think Geraldo and I are finding that, like, to make sure that you're doing like your research and your all of the other responsibilities of graduate school, and then how do you fit in kind of the work that you're really passionate about on top of your research? Do you have advice on that?
I think the first thing is to either find an advisor that supports that, or make your advisor be supportive of it, which is hard thing to just say. I recognize that I'm like a bit outspoken and a bit angry at times, and so I have to say what's on my mind, or else like I'll implode. Honestly, sort of the first thing is to find a faculty member or even a postdoc that will help advocate for you. Because I think because it is more work to also take on advocacy. I think that it's not I don't want to sugarcoat it and say, my grad, actually, I think my grad school experience was easier having done advocacy work, but it is something that also takes your time. And so if you're doing research and doing the things that you need to do to get your degree while also doing advocacy work, it's going to be just more hours. But I think that in terms of how to balance those things, I think that just treating it sort of like a research schedule, make sure that you are taking the opportunities that you have to sort of reflect on what your goals are in activism. And then again, also, not reinventing the wheel over and over again, finding organizations that support, what you're trying to do, or the voice that you're trying to cultivate to yourself also are really helpful. So, within chemistry, there's the GTCA, you can get even as a graduate student, you can, occupy certain positions within the GTCA. I think the other thing, even just within your own department, advocating for folks to, especially like at things like seminar or with like, women in STEM or WCC events, going into those spaces as a queer person and expressing the need to have an out queer speaker that's talking about their chemistry or that's talking about, queerness in chemistry as well. I think that, again, with my experience at PSU, nobody was like outwardly bigoted towards me in any way. They were just really apathetic and really sort of just like, I'm down with the cause, but I don't know what to do. And it's sometimes it's a little surprising, just how much handholding you have to do, but that really what a lot of departments are looking for is someone to say like, this is what we need. And I think that, the unfortunate issue that arises from that is then that they expect the trans and queer person to take up that work. But, I think that there's enough of us, around nowadays that who are all really interested and excited about activism, that, you can do something collaborative. You're the only person. You can find another queer person in your department and, try to distribute the labor of bringing in a queer speaker, between the two of you, or, sort of contacting even things as little as like, I will send out sort of like legislature or an email templates for professors to sign and send to states that are undergoing anti-trans bills right now. I mean, it's really, you sort of have to like slide it right into their DMs, but they'll do stuff if you ask them. And if they don't, then they're awful.
But I have to agree with you. Having API that supports you, it's like the best thing. I have a friend in my lab, Isaac Life, which we have had in the show, and I'm sure you know them. They're like great advocate and activists for trans community, and they also do research on that. And so Melanie told them that could be a part of their dissertation. So it's like so crazy that you're a PhD student in chemistry and one chapter in your dissertation is about research in trans, right? That's like,
that's so cool.
It can get better,
Really awesome.
I love Melanie so much. She's like, she's an amazing PI. I love her so much.
And I mean, I think that that at least PIs who were going to change in the first place are changing, right? People kind of see the importance of having this melting pot of identities in chemistry and how that contributes to like the bettering of how it makes research better, and how it makes lab communities better and how it makes collaboration better. That I think that those professors are recognizing the importance of that. And that then if you say like, hey, like I need a PI that I can CC on emails when I like send this uncomfortable thing, or I need 3 PIs to put their names down when I invite this speaker to say that they support inviting the speaker, or saying to your own PI or another PI, I want to invite this person that went to your alma mater, and like I want to invite them because they're going to talk about XYZ queerness and I mean, I think that asking, you'd be surprised at the sort of people that will help.
100%. So changing gears a little bit, who is your chemistry or science role model and why? And you can have more than one if you want.
Okay, wait. So it's sort of interesting because I have a few. I really honestly, like the people that I have worked with and will be working with are people that I like really idolize in chemistry. So my PhD advisor, Teresa McCormick, she's like the smartest person I've ever met. She's like navigating having 2 very young children as a PI, talking about and actually living the work-life balance that she preaches. And she's just very like, we talk about when we email back and forth, like, she sends the exclamation, professionalism is oppression, like at the end female, you know, like she's just a really good lady. And she used to curl for the state of Oregon, so that's pretty cool.
That's fun.
Also, so my undergraduate advisor was and is a friend of mine, Dr. Nancy Williams. We sort of established this very, really wonderful and supportive relationship when I was working in her lab. And she has been so open with me about herself and her life and her transition throughout, you know, my time as a chemist. I mean, she was the only trans person that I knew in chemistry up until like an ACS meeting 3 years ago. And I mean, and having, you know, the fact that I like literally had a trans mentor as an undergrad was really, really phenomenal. And I think that it was her, you know, like, you know, she would teach inorganic and then would drive into downtown LA to go sing with like the trans choir and march in the trans pride parade. You
That's
know,
so
like,
cool.
That is really cool.
Oh my God.
Really great. I think, you know, Teresa, like Dr. McCormick really sort of, her very kind words are, you know, like, don't get mad, get manipulative. Like, you know, use anger your anger to get what you want, but like in a way that is, you know, that is like getting people on your side, not forcing their hand or making them not realize that you're forcing their hand. And you know, Nancy really showed me that you could balance advocacy work and research together at the and then I mean, you know, I really also really look up to Miriam, Dr. Bowering, who I'm going to be working with. I think that they do phenomenal science. I really love weird kinetics and the fervor at which they just like scratch the itch of a single mechanism is like, that's boring. I mean, and then again, also they advocate for their students and they advocate for non-binary people at Reed in a way that's phenomenal. And I mean, I think that I also really look up to just like every single young PI at Reed College. A lot of them queer in the chemistry department, and I think that's really awesome. And I think a sort of like unexpected one is Dr. Allison Campbell. I met her when I was working with sort of organizing the Pacific Northwest regional meeting. And we met sort of personally to go grab like lunch and a beer on a couple occasions. And I really sort of told her about my insecurities around chemistry, that I still don't think I'm smart enough, that I sometimes have, I mean, not necessarily regrets, but I get nervous about the fact that I went to an R2 to get my PhD, that, you know, this whole pedigree thing, I'm just not cut out for it. I like can't work hard enough. I'm not dedicated enough, that sort of thing. You know, and she really just like gave me like the pep talk of a lifetime at this McMiniman bar. And you know, just about like, if you stay within what you love and you figure out ways of motivating people to be passionate about their science or like working for you, that you can, you know, you can take on any challenge. And so I've really appreciated her. She doesn't realize that she's had such a large impact on me, but she definitely she's just like the really, you know, like just like big dyke energy, just like I just really, Allison Campbell for president, really.
Amazing.
I mean, I know she's already president, but maybe again. But I mean, and she has a passion for science that has allowed her to, you know, climb up the ranks of PNNL and now like runs an entire department there. And I really, you know, look up to her for her leadership style, and then also for her transparency around, you know, the sort of where she came from and what she started out with. And she's really good at fighting the imposter syndrome. You know, plus she's an athlete, and I love that.
Amazing. That's so
sounds
sweet. Like you've had some really great pockets of people in your life.
Yeah. I ran screaming out of that pharmaceutical lab. I tell you, they were really amazing. he was really, really phenomenal and just like really kind and generous with his compliments. And the other chemists that I worked with were real a bunch of guys that were having their midlife crises, and it was a lot. And so I chose only to be with good mentors. Strongly vetted mentors.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So last question, where can people follow you on social media if they would like to connect with you?
Yes. Okay, let's see if I can get this off the top of my head. You can follow me on Twitter as @Irv_does_chem. So Irv does chem with underscores separating them. Yeah. You can also follow me on Instagram, which is a more personal account, but it shows more of my, basically it's just me rock climbing or the dog that I am on a long-term babysitting run for, June, who's currently sleeping as we are doing this interview. The dog and rock content, you can follow me at I think it's underscore, well, hang on. It's underscore wrinkles the clown underscore. It's a weird inside joke, so maybe I'll just change it to @IrvDoesChem. I'll just do that. You can follow Instagram @IrvDoesChem.
Amazing.
I just that's like there, and I think maybe that's done now.
That's funny.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it was great chatting with you and hearing about some of the work, and
so nice.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah. I'm excited to join the passe.
Yay.
Yeah. And thank you for this, because this is like I hope you recognize that this is activism.
Thank you. I think
it's like fun as well. But activism is fun in my opinion. It's difficult at times, but like this is some really historical activism that y'all got going on here, so I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was good talking to you.
Yeah, have a nice day.
You too.
Bye.
All right, bye.
We're about a month away from Pride Month, and as we all know, last year we celebrated Pride on the podcast by featuring some incredible STEM LGBTQ plus scientists. We'd love to hear y'all's ideas on who we should interview or what should we do to celebrate Pride this year. So send us your ideas at myfavequeerchemist@gmail.com.
We hope that y'all are being safe and healthy and continuing to support each other during this pandemic. Please, please, please get your vaccine, y'all, to keep yourself and those around you safe. Remember to fill out the nomination form on our Twitter if you're interested in being interviewed for the show. You can follow us at MFQC Pod. Take care, everybody, and stay safe. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Adios.
You've been listening to an episode of My Fave Queer Chemist, presented by Stereochemistry. Stereochemistry is the official podcast of Chemical and Engineering News, which is published by the American Chemical Society. Thanks for listening.